This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Okay, in their efforts to make the Helix HX Stomp as accurate as possible, there are some things that Line 6 have done with their hardware and implementation that I think could affect your tone negatively, affect your experience negatively if you don't understand what they're doing. And so I wanted to take you through these things in this video. One is input impedance and how that is implemented. Another is headroom, that parameter. And another one, the hum and ripple parameters in the amp models. If you already know what those are, you don't necessarily need to continue watching the video. You might learn something, you might be able to help other people out in the comments as well. But let's jump in. I'll show you the easiest one to demonstrate first. Okay, so I'm sure that this is something that you should know about. Now, if you're going to be double tracking in any sense at all, the hum parameter in the amp model, I think, should default to off. Now I've got it turned up to 10 here, and the thing is that you might not notice it, but this is supposedly a feature. I think it should be an option. Some amp models make more hum than others. So for example, the litigator can be pretty bad. Like if you turn it up to 10, it's noticeable, right? And the other time that it's really noticeable, like I say, is that if you were to track with, so say like 4 kind of sensitive lead tones, that could potentially catch you out. The other time that it's caught me out, I was filming for Yamaha many years ago. I did a demo of the Yamaha Pacifica, and they had a power cab that I'd used for the first time. I took my real Helix and I had a dual amp preset, and we were finding that there was some hum and we couldn't really do anything about it. I went back home and I looked at my preset and I found, yes, of course, the hum defaults to 5, and that's enough to actually be picked up and create issues. So that's number one. I think you should know about that, and I think personally I'd be more happy if that defaulted to 0. You can really hear it on the Line 6 Catalyst, which has the same models. The hum defaults to 5, and frankly I think maybe that isn't the best, most useful feature to have on all the time. Here's another feature that I think you should know about, and that is this headroom parameter, which is in some of the kind of analog delays, some of the choruses and that sort of stuff. Now, it's not immediately obvious necessarily what this does, but what I've found is that I felt like there have been some times where I'd stick something in and this headroom parameter defaulting to 0, It means that essentially any non-linearities that are in there, so sometimes it'd be something like a preamp in the space echo, that sort of thing, or say if you're in chorus, does that one have one? Headroom, yeah, plastic chorus. So we turn down the headroom. So that is another feature that I think should, well, in my personal opinion, I've always preferred the headroom to be higher rather than lower. What that essentially is doing is pretty much sort of emulating clipping within that block itself, but that can really, really drastically change your tone. Obviously, I've showed you with extreme examples there, but if you think you put something at the end of your chain and it has that kind of headroom feature on, you could be adding additional clipping, or transistor tape actually, a really good idea. You've got the headroom here, let's turn it all the way down. So yeah, for me personally, clipping in the delays, clipping in the chorus, I don't think has an awesome sound. So that for me is why I would max out that headroom every time that I use a block that has it in there. It might be chorus, it might be delay. There's a few blocks like that, but I'm wanting my delay and choruses to be pretty transparent-ish in terms of, I don't want them to kind of make it seem like the tone is collapsing back on itself, which is essentially what I feel like happens if you leave that headroom lower and you send a high amount of signal into it. Okay, this last one is kind of a bit of a complicated thing to explain, kind of, but in the real world, some of these real pedals that we've got in here would have the effect of dropping the impedance. Now we can sort of mimic, if you've ever tried this in front of a real amplifier, you're having like a really long lead essentially starts to turn down the tone of your pickups, essentially, like that sort of thing, as in you lose high end. So this is a gradual thing, and you get, a gradual roll off the more there is cable length added. It also affects the taper of your volume knobs and stuff like that. And high end, especially with single coils, rolls off naturally and quite quickly with your volume knob. So you might find that there's a feature in the Helix, which is this input here, which is effectively rolling off your signal quite a lot. So I'm going to make this quite simple. If we clear that block, clear this block, and clear this block. So now what I'm going to do is add in what I know has a really low input impedance. So the arbitrator fuzz phase. So the way that this is implemented, by default, here, auto input impedance, you've got two settings, first and enabled. If you have it set to first, even though it's not in the chain, it will have a pronounced effect. So let's just copy the block, action, clear the block. Here's without it. So there's no question that you can hear that, right? Now, here's the other point. So we can, if we go into global settings, in preferences, turn this to first enabled, and then should be less of an impact, and then the impedance will only change when you turn this fuzz on. because without changing that, essentially your fuzzes will have, you know, fuzzes and tube screamers, that sort of thing, will have more high end than the actual pedal would have. So you at least probably, I would suggest, want to go into your preferences and set that auto input impedance to first enabled. So when you've got it out of the chain, it's like you're in true bypass mode. Or another thing you might want to consider doing is just set this to fully open all the time. But you can hear that obviously that makes quite a big difference with the fuzzes as to how the fuzz sounds. Or, you know, don't have your drive first in the chain. The drive that you want affecting stuff first in the chain. Like, so it's looking for whichever block is enabled first in the chain, it will drop the impedance in line with that if you've got it set to first enabled. Or if you don't want this to happen at all, just set it to 1 mega ohm. Things like the Fractal FM3 don't have this impedance circuit. I don't hear people complaining about this being like a thing that creates bad tones. Generally, I would like to preserve the top end. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely something I'm conscious of as being like a major thing that could affect your tone. So those are just 3 really crucial things that could be getting you bad results within the Helix world without you really knowing about it. So hopefully there's some, you know, tips there that could help you, you know, get some better results. I hope this was a somewhat helpful video. Leave folks, you know, some tips in the comments if you've got them, if you've got other suggestions for stuff. Cheers for stopping by.